All right. Well, hey, good morning. As I'm already sipping the coffee, it's Saturday. Needing a little pick me up. Been up a little bit longer. Took Gabby to go help out and do some yard work for a friend who's just needing some help. So luckily, I've got a teenager. I can say I offer this teenager as tribute, and away you go. So good morning, everybody. Good morning. Well, hey, go ahead and hit those like and share buttons. Drop a comment. I know a few of you normally drop comments anyway, so go ahead and do that on whatever platform you're on. It really, surprisingly, if you're on YouTube, comments make a world of difference. I can actually just watch the numbers, and if someone drops a comment or two on there, and all of a sudden that video doubles or triples in plays. So comments make a huge difference. Likes and shares make a huge difference. So yeah, thanks for helping out. Really appreciate you guys. Well, today we are on the 15th lesson in Genesis. I know. How long is it going to go? Well, Genesis is a big book, so it's going to go a while. We're continuing on. We're keep going. Where am I at on that screen? Wow. All right, let's move that over. Those of you who don't watch the video, yeah, it's all right. It gets cut out. All that stuff's gone in the audio. So, but yeah, we're on the 15th lesson in Genesis. We're in chapter 12, and I mean, we're basically doing most of it. It's like I said, it's been a bit of a morning. Let's pull that up. For some odd reason, I want to say that is all of chapter 12, but another part of me says, no, that's not all of chapter 12. So we're doing a good chunk. We're doing Genesis chapter 12, at least the first 20 verses, which, again, some reason I want to say it is all of it. Because it is. There we go. That is right. It is all of chapter 12. And that's good. We get a chance to move along a little bit. I know we've had a few studies to where we'd hit 9 verses, 6 verses, and that would take an hour plus because there's giant things that are happening. And now we're into a part of the narrative here that, again, it's really important, it's really big, a lot's going on. And Abraham, we're on Abraham's call, and this is Abraham and Sarah and the beginning of their journey and the beginning of how they're walking with God. It's a major part of the narrative. It's a major part of the story of God's people and moving out and onwards. But it's things that it's obviously so. So because there's more obvious parts with that, there's less in-depth pieces we need to cover. So it's just one of those weird things to where you'd think some of these other ones would go really fast and some of these ones that you might take more time in. No, it's sometimes the nuggets are hidden where we don't necessarily see them. So let's go ahead and let's dig into this. Genesis chapter 12, the whole thing, verses 1 to 20 in the English Standard Version. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered, and the people that they had acquired in Haran. And they set out to go to the land of Canaan. When they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At the time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built there an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. From there he moved to the hill country on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and called upon the name of the Lord. And Abram journeyed on still going toward Negeb. Now, there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say, you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. But the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called to Abram and said, What is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife, take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Okay, so we're breaking this down into two basic areas. It does break down maybe a bit further, but for what we're doing, we're just breaking this down into two areas. First of all, verses 1 to 9, this is Abram's call. And then 10 to 20, this is Sarai in Egypt. It's really both of them in Egypt, but I want to make the point that it's both parties going on here. It's not just one. Well, let's dig into it. Verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. Again, here, Lord, in Hebrew, the Lord said. In Hebrew, this is actually it's a past perfect tense. Okay, so when we read this in English, some of the stuff is missed. If you remember last week, I was telling you that this call appears to have come prior or before they were in Haran. Well, this is part of that, is the actual language that's being used in Hebrew, which we don't necessarily get in English. This is a past perfect tense, meaning that God had already said, and maybe potentially he was saying it again. I mean, if you've ever gotten a call from God, sometimes he tells us a few times because we're knuckleheads and it takes us a little bit. Now, I want to point out a big theme that we're looking here in this act of the book is land. The land is a big theme throughout this section of Genesis. So notice here, you're going to leave your father's land. You're going to leave the land of your people, and you're going to go to the land that I'm giving you, and it's moving forward. Okay, so the land is a big theme, but check out here how this spreads. And he talks about, and God tells Abram, starting from large to narrowed down and small, what he's leaving. All of which is hard, okay? All of which is hard, but he narrows it down to probably the most intimate and most personal that makes it the hardest to do. It says, go from your country. Go from your land. The word here for country is the same word, and I think, yeah, I have it right here. That is the same word for land, and it's Eres. Now, Eres means earth. It really just means earth. It can be used for city. It can be used for country. It can be used for land. It can actually be used all the way down for the underworld, meaning it's a place of the dead as well, which is kind of telling because, I mean, earth is now the place of death. It's where things happen, right? We die. We weren't supposed to, but because of sin entering the world, we now die. And so Eres can actually mean the land of the dead. Now, so the word here that he's using, that Moses is giving as the idea of, hey, leave this place, this land to go to the next land, he's using the same word. So it's the same exact meaning here. So leave your land. Leave your kindred, your brethren, your not just your family, but your people, like your entire people group. Okay, now we've gone through, did some of the genealogies, but we also know they had other sons and daughters, and the populations were growing, right? So this people group, he's saying, leave your people. So leave your country, leave your land, leave your region, leave your people. And he says it all the way down to, and your father's house. And we talked last time that most likely his father passed away and then they left. Okay, so leave your father's house. Notice it doesn't say, God doesn't say, leave your father, which would be an indication that he was still alive, right? It would be, because this is speaking past, something's already happened. It's not saying leave your father. He's saying leave your father's house. Okay, leave your father's house, which actually means leave your family. It's not saying leave your wife. That's not what's being said, because two become one. That is a very integral part of marriage and biblical doctrine on marriage. The two become one. If God calls one, he's calling both, at least to some degree. I know some pastors will say, hey, you hire the pastor, you don't hire the pastor's wife or the pastor's husband, depending on the church group, whatever else, right? I mean, there's something to that, but at the same time, there's also something to the two become one, and you work as a team. It's teams work differently depending on the situation, right? So take it as you will. But when God calls, he calls both. And in this, he's saying, I want you to leave this area and go to the next area, the land that I am giving you. And with that, it's not Abram, leave everything, I just want you. It's Abram, it's time for you to go, and that includes your wife. Okay, so that is the directive. But also notice, this is the land that I will show you. It's not the land that I told you about. Abram didn't really know where he was going. They knew, because to some degree, the general direction in which they were probably going to go. And we can say that because we already saw this. Before they were heading towards the land of Canaan. Still, they're heading towards the land of Canaan again. So they have the general direction of where they're going, at least. But they don't know for sure the end point of where they're going. They just know you're going in this direction, which can be, in some ways, I guess, exciting to not necessarily know exactly where you're going and exactly what you're doing. But it can really also be very terrifying to just not know what's the end goal. And then keep in mind, Abram's family they were pagans. So he's got a pagan background. Pagan gods were kind of brutal to people. This might be kind of a scary situation. If I don't follow, what's he going to do to me? And if I do follow, he's taking me from all of my security. Taking me from my family. He's taking me from my people. He's taking me from my own country, my own region. What is this God going to do to me? So this is a very terrifying thing in this situation. But he's going to have faith and move forward and go through this. Remember, this is a section to where, yes, God created everything and had relationship with, meaning, he communed with, he discussed and did stuff with Adam and Eve, and then things separated, and that interaction was very different. We start seeing lots of different ways that humanity was going against God constantly, so much that he wiped the earth and started over again with the flood, right? And then people, again, even with the same command, spread out, fill the earth, occupy, and expand, like produce more people and spread out, go and be my image bearers over the whole earth. They kept falling away from that and weren't doing it. And so he had to do it again. And then we had the Tower of Babel, right? Where he split the people up and he divided their languages and he did placeholders. Go back to the Tower of Babel episode. We did placeholders. God did placeholders with the divine council. And so now you have the situation to where people then, much like now, don't typically want to really follow God or follow God well, and would rather follow these really kind of malevolent, either non-existent deities, non-existent spirits, or potentially some other kind of a spirit that's just harsh and mean, hey. And so this situation is a little different than what we might think today inside of the church. Things are a little different. So this is probably a very scary situation for Abram and for Sarai. But we see something that's actually kind of cool here. And we're going to see it here in just a little bit, but let's keep on with this section of the narrative. 2 and 3. And I will make of you a great nation. Now, great here, this is the beginning of that covenantal stance, right? This is a covenantal structure built into this. The language in Hebrew actually reads more like a covenant. And it reads quite literally as, if we were going to take a direct literal translation and just move it to English, would say, so that I might make you a great nation. Not, and I will make of you, but that I might. Go there, that I might make of you a great nation. And I will bless you, and I will make your name great. See, this is the promise. This is that beginning promise that is to encourage Abram to follow through and go with this. God is telling him, I'm not like the lowercase g gods that you've been worshiping or that your family worshiped. I want to make you great. I want to make your name great. I want to bless you. And on top of this, I want to make a great nation of you. If you remember last week, it's already known that Sarai is barren. They already know she can't have kids. So this is a very bold statement to hear from God. My wife's barren. I know my wife's barren. And you want to make a great nation out of me? This is okay. But then he follows up with 3, verse 3. I will bless those who bless you, and to him who dishonors you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Side note on the very end of that, yeah, it's kind of a vague statement in Hebrew. I do think that ESV captures it pretty well as to what this would mean. In you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed, because that really goes with the rest of the gospel and the Bible. Like, that's just kind of how it works. But let's go through this. He's going to make a great nation. A great nation. Now, this great nation, this is both in numbers and in significance. The Israelite nation, the nation of Israel, is a prominent nation that has created ripples throughout the world. And I don't care what side of history you decide to land on that. There are people who love Israel. There are people who hate Israel. There are people who, I don't know. The Bible says people fall in all different areas of this. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what part of this you fall into. You still have to recognize Israel has been a wave maker, right? They have been a great nation in significance, meaning they were a very significant nation, and they're coming back, and they're another significant player in that part of the world, right? God really did fulfill that. He really did make them a great nation, both in number. The Jewish people, grand numbers. Not even 100 years ago, multiple countries tried to wipe out the Jewish population completely off the face of the earth. Didn't happen. And they're going strong now again. And Israel's back. It's just one of those things that it just keeps going. So God made them a great nation as in numerical, and a great nation as in power and status. Okay, let's take a look at Isaiah 51:2. Gets you another taste of this. Look to Abraham, your father, and to Sarah, who bore you, for he was but one when I called him, that I might bless him and multiply him. This is another thing. Like, look back in history. I can make things happen, right? God's telling, I can take a barren and an old man and create the nation that is my chosen people, that spreads out and will be there till the end of days. It's not going to go away. The people are not going to go away. It says bless. Now the term bless here, a fun little note on this. And this is really interesting. Read into it what you're going to read into it. I brought it in here. I hesitated to bring it in because I know people are going to read into this. but it is such an interesting piece that it almost just needs to be said. The term bless, it only occurs 5 times. 5 times from Genesis 1 to Genesis 11. That's it. It happens 5 times in these 3 verses alone. God's talking to Abram at the time, and saying, I'm going to bless you. This term bless, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to bless those that bless you. That term happens 5 times in 3 verses when it just barely happened the same amount 5 times in the last 11 chapters altogether. The narrative is shifting. The narrative is shifting. God's plan is starting to move forward. The stage is set. God is now developing and moving his plan forward with how to bring his creation back. That is the significance part of this. God has already, things fell apart, and he has worked his plan, and things are now in place to where he can begin that plan with the family to start to bring his creation back. It says, make your name great. In ancient Near East, your name was more than just a title. Okay, it meant like your status, your character. Your name meant something. Your father's name meant something. Your father's name meant something. Okay, and your children's names meant something. The heritage went in both directions, and this is one of the things with that type of society. When you start talking honor, shame was always used in that type of society, and it still is today, for reconciliation. It was always used as a way to bring people back, right? It was to keep things in order as to maintain that balance for the entire family. And if there was shame given, it was a shame to bring people back into position and order. It wasn't you're shamed, you need to leave. It was a shame like you need to get back in line, and let's keep doing this in the proper direction and in the proper order. A little different than we think of shame here in the United States and in the West. So your name being great is the great stature, because if Abraham had done really, really bad things, that would set the stage for the entire Israelite people. Okay, well, the Israelite people then would change the name of Abraham as well. All right, so it goes both directions, and that's kind of what's being said here. Is I'm going to make your character and your name known and relevant, your stature and status known throughout. We still say Father Abraham today, so I mean, say that kind of works. And then the bless and the curse, because you get here in verse 3, I will bless those who bless you, and to him who dishonors you, I will curse. So since God chose Abraham, and Abram here, to bring blessing to the whole world, he's going to bless those who bless him, and woe to those who dishonor him. But notice the way that this is phrased, because there is a distinct difference here in the phrasing of this. I will bless those. God is coming out and saying, I am going to bless those who bless you. Those who are good to you, I'm good to. But he says it in reverse. He says, I'm going to bless those who bless you. He flips that. I'm not, and it doesn't say, I will curse those who dishonor you. It says, those who dishonor you, I will curse. This is, and I know it can feel in English like we're cutting hairs here, but inside the language, there's a reason why this is flipped. This actually shows God's desire to bless over God's desire to curse and to do bad and to do ill towards people. God's desire is for the good of man and woman, mankind, people. God wants to bless. Why? We're his creation. Not only are we his creation, we're his image bearers. We're made in his image. He wants to do good to us and for us. Unlike most of the pagan deities that really don't, you get into modern era and everyone's tried to turn things around to make it seem like every belief system is for good and every belief system teaches the same thing. No, they don't. Not even close do they teach the same basic things. Not even close. People who say they teach the same things, might actually want to look into things just a smidge, because they're not even close. This is a defining characteristic of the God of the Bible. He desires to do good towards people. He's not saying do good for me, just do it for me, just do it for me. There's sacrifices, but that is trying to bridge that gap and to fix the relationship. Okay, this is not a, I need you to just do for me because I'm a needy God and I want you to put grapes in my mouth. Peasant, come here. No, he's saying my job and what my desire is, not my job, but my desire is to bless you. And because my desire is to bless you through and all of humanity through you, those who bless you, I'm going to bless because I want to bless. I want to be a blessing. And those who dishonor you, who I have chosen to send my saving grace and how I'm getting my creation back, those who dishonor you, I will curse because they stand against me and my plan to bring creation back into order and to bring my people back to me. There's a difference. That is a defining difference. God is not looking, when you hear people say, oh, the God of the Old Testament especially, he just wanted to do horrible things to people. No, he didn't. He really didn't. And this right here shows that. He did not want to do bad. He wants to bless and wants to do good. All right, 4 and the first half of 5. So Abram went as the Lord had told him. Again, Lord in all caps is Yahweh. Some places that you look at, they'll say it's Adonai, but it's Yahweh. Okay. Yahweh had told him, and Lot, wow. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Now notice the phrasing in that. Lot went with him. This wasn't, because this almost feels like a contradiction when we get a little bit further into 5, saying he took. The reason that it's phrased this way right here is to let it known they didn't forcefully take Lot. This was something that Lot decided to do on his own. Lot decided, I want to go with you, uncle, right? This is their nephew. I want to go with you. I'm going to go with you. This was a choice of Lot. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was a young man, young man, at 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his brother's son. And I think we go a little bit further from this. Yep. And all their possessions that they had gathered and the people that they had acquired in Haran. And they set out to go to the land of Canaan. And we're going to pause right there. It's a big chunk of 5, but that's where we're going to pause. Now, first thing, again, Abram's, the verb used here for Abram's first move, first action, right? Verb is an action, right? Actions, verbs, okay? In literary terms, his first action matched and complied completely with God's call and command. He moved. God's call was go. Go from all of this. So Abram went. In Hebrew, it means he walked. It's literally what it means. He walked. He got up and walked. He did this. Okay, so Abram followed and obeyed. Lot willingly went. Sarai, it doesn't say. It doesn't say. But then again, culture was very different. That culture is very different today, even from Western societies. But then, specifically, it really was very different. Wife, this is what we're doing. Okay, and they up and go. The head of the household was, the head of the household and made these decisions, and they went. So they went, and they gathered, but notice this, and they gathered all their possessions, their things. They needed their tent to live in because they're a nomadic people group, and so they would take a tent. Now, not like a tent that we think of today that you pick up at REI or something, but like a big, nice tent. They would have their rugs. They would put it on multiple carts, load them up on donkeys and maybe horses or camels or whatever, and load it all up, and they would go. And it says here that took all their possessions that they had gathered, the people that they had acquired in Haran. Now, that sounds like slavery. If if you've ever heard of it, or you've ever, we don't need to romanticize things here, right? That sounds like slavery. Well, the Hebrew here, and I'm always curious as to why some of this gets translated in these ways. It's like you can look into the words and you can get into what they actually mean, and then people just kind of come to this normal consensus. Okay, nepes, if you get back, look back all the way to chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 30, we talked about this word nepes, and the Hebrew term nepes, which means spirit. In fact, let's look at it in context in chapter 1 really fast. Chapter 1, verse 30 says this, "And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the nepes." Nepes means the breath of life. It means soul, spirit, okay? So this concept here that is written here in Genesis 12 as people in the ESV, this term people actually means living creatures, whether that would be humans or animals. So what's actually being said in the Hebrew here is they gathered all of their possessions and all living things that were going with them. The people, the oxen, the goats, which was all really normal. And if you're traveling by caravan, like they would have with this, you're going to have animals. But there's no note in here really of animals. They gathered all the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out to the land of Canaan. They had to have animals, but it was kind of assumed that they had animals. But the issue here is we say people, as in with nepes, that's the soul is only for people. Well, that's actually not what we see in the word earlier in Genesis. And so with this is saying they gathered all their possessions, all their things that they would need, including all of the living that they need and were taking with them on the journey, whether that was animal, whether that was people. Yes, we don't need to romanticize this. Were there likely servants and slaves that were going? Yeah. I mean, you see comments all the time all over the place in the Old Testament about the strong young men. That wasn't always family members. It wasn't always just slaves either, but people who would devote themselves to a higher ranking person to go and do these things. We would call that a bondservant in the Greek, right? That is somebody who chooses to be a follower of or kind of a servant of to go and do that. Okay, so this right here is really an indication that they took their livestock, they took their people that were following them, all of the things. So they took their stuff and all of the living that would go forward with this. Now let's finish up 5 and go all the way through 9. We're going to end this section right here, and it's pretty quick. So 5b, which is one sentence, when they came to the land of Canaan, Abram passed through the land and to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Then the Lord appeared to Abram. Now let's stop. Let's actually do this kind of chunk by chunk, step by step as we go through this. They came into the land of Canaan, and Abram passed through the land. The Canaanites were there. Okay, you get this other note right after that. Well, the Canaanites, at the time, the Canaanites were in the land. So most of the commentaries are saying he was being respectful. He didn't want to invade and encroach on people's territories. Read up on the Canaanites. There's a reason you wouldn't want to encroach up on the Canaanites' territories. So he was being prudent. He was being wise, and he was being prudent in coming through and getting in this. So he was staying into the hill country to where he could just kind of be away from people, more so in the area where he should be, but away from most of the people. And he comes to the place of Shechem. Now, Shechem was an actual, it's a town. It was a known area. It was a smaller town that was inside of that hill country. Some consider it like the heart of the Canaanites area. Okay, so he comes to Shechem and to the oak of Moreh. Now, if you're reading in a different translation, you might see this as the terebinth. Now, a terebinth, there's a large tree. And oak and terebinth it's debated, but they're both known as large trees that would stand above the other trees in the areas around it. They were abnormally large trees for where they were at. These types of trees, especially this one here, and there's multiple others throughout the Old Testament, but this one here is kind of a known one in that region. Large trees like this were oftentimes places of worship for pagans and different groups and different people. And so it was very common, it wasn't uncommon, to have different altars there and different prayer rituals done there and different things happening there. Fun side note, one of the most commons, especially here at Shechem, that happened was to a goddess of fertility. And so it kind of makes sense where they're getting to this, they're hoping for things, they've come to the region and they move forward and they get to this already known kind of an important ritualistic, or even one would say a holy spot for the people of the area, because it's that big tree that stands out. It's in the middle of this region. It's in the plains, potentially up on a hill right there, in this standout spot. It's a known holy spot, and so they get to this known area. And so what happens? They pass through the land, they get to there. The Canaanites were in the land at the time. Verse 7, then the Lord appeared to Abram. Pause. That's not how it's phrased before. When we go back to verse 1, it doesn't say that the Lord appeared and spoke to Abram. What it says is the Lord said. Now, was that in a dream? Was that through the Holy Spirit and giving him guidance to go? If you've ever heard from the Lord, that's often how it works. Okay. But here in verse 7, the Lord appeared. The Lord appeared. It is a very direct piece. How did the Lord appear? Well, many believe that this right here is actually a portion of theophany. I have it in here somewhere, but I'm not even seeing it on the screen right now, but that's okay. This is an area and a piece of theophany. God appears to Abram and Abraham then 3 times. 3 times, and this is the first of the 3. And there it is. Yeah, theophany, there it is. There's a potential flesh, like God in the flesh appearing to someone. When you get into the New Testament period, this would be, like, the concept now is this was actually Jesus. Like pre-birth of Jesus, this was the Son appearing in the form of a man, a human. We already know angels can do this, right? You get later on into this and angels show up and they can't tell. Like, you can tell there's something different about them, but they were in the body of a man. And sometimes people wouldn't even recognize that they were something different than a man. Okay. And you even get that into the New Testament. Continued hospitality, for some have hosted angels without knowing, right? So you get into this. We know angels can do this, and so we also know that God likes to work and do different things like this, and he was already in the Garden of Eden. That was part of the purpose of this, was God to be there and walking through. Well, if God's walking through, he's got some kind of a body to do that with, and the concept is this right here. When the Lord appeared, most likely, this is a time when the Son, Jesus, was probably there talking with Abraham. And he says, to your offspring, I will give this land. So he, meaning Abram, built there an altar to the Lord. So he's at a place of worship where people are worshiping all sorts of different pagan gods, pagan deities, and he builds an altar to God. Abram's background is pagan. That's a normal concept for him to do, but he's also setting the stage to worship the true God, the Most High, the right God. So he's setting the stage to do that. Okay, so this was a normal act for him to do. Verse 8, from there, he moved on to the hill country on the east of Bethel. So we moved from one hill section to another hill section, but this time to the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, which means he stayed there for a bit. How long? Well, according to what we get into verse 10, probably not very long, but he pitched his tent there in this hill country east of Bethel on the west. So Bethel's on the west and Ai is on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. Now, we don't We don't know why he built this altar other than he's trusting God. He's wanting to follow God more fully, and he's taking the appropriate steps and doing the things that he needs to do and that he should be doing. That was a normal thing to build these altars. Now, Bethel back in the day at that point was Luz. Let's take a look at 28:19. Oh, yeah. Look at 28:19. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at first. Now, I want to backtrack really, really fast because I missed a scripture here before when we were talking about this tree, this terebinth or this oak in Shechem. This was a known location. This was a very known location, and we actually get another note of that in Joshua 24:26. So let's just look at that really fast. Joshua 24:26. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set it up there under the terebinth that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And that is the terebinth, that is the oak that is spoken of here at Shechem. That is another note of this place being a part where God is working. And when you consider cosmic geography, these things really make sense, okay? These things really make sense that they are setting things in a place and expecting God to work in certain areas. That was the normal concept. Verse 9, so after he set up that, they pitched their tent, right? They called upon the name of the Lord. And then Verse 9, and Abram journeyed on. So he stayed there for a bit because he pitched his tent. And they were staying for a little bit. Then they journey on, still going towards Negeb. Now, Negeb was also Negev, depending on how you spell it. You know, there's a couple different spellings, Negeb or Negev as in Victor. Same place. It is it's a desert. It's a really, really dry desert area that's just south of Jerusalem. Now, verse 10. Now there was famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there. For the famine was severe in the land. We've heard this a few times, right? If you've been in the Bible for very long, you'll know this happens periodically. There is famine, and people need help. And so they go into the land of Egypt. Egypt was a very rich land. It was a very powerful land. They were a conquering and ruling people. It was an idea. They had the Nile River there, a place of water to where they could get the water that they would need. It just made sense that was a place to go to take care of your family. And so they get ready, and Abram says, we're going to go to Egypt to sojourn there, to ride out the storm of this situation. They doubled down. Okay, Moses kind of doubles down on the narrative here and saying, for the famine was severe in the land. And I think that's an important piece that we want to keep in mind. Things, that wasn't just, hey, there's a little bit of a famine, we're just going to, wait here. No, things were bad. Like, he was trying to follow God. Okay, he was trying to do what it was that God was asking him to do, but things got so bad that they needed to pull out from that area and move to a different region. And was this the right thing to do? You know what? I wasn't there. I'm not in that situation. I can't make that call. It turns into a little bit of a hairy situation, but I wasn't there to make that call. I don't know. And, we get a couple different lessons from this here in the scriptures, but at the end of the day, we weren't there. And also at the end of the day, God still uses Abraham and Sarah to create the chosen people, to create the people of Israel, and to send Jesus through to save mankind. So, I'm not saying don't worry about what you're doing. I'm saying do it and do everything as unto the Lord. Like, do things with trepidation, but make sure you're doing the things that God's calling you to do, and do it with a clear conscience. Do things with a clear conscience. 11-13. When he was about to enter Egypt, he said to Sarai, his wife, I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance. That's flirting with his wife still. It's amazing, right? Anyway, beautiful in appearance. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will not but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake. So, although it's likely that Sarai is in her 50s or 60s at this point, if he's in his 75, some commentaries say she was 65 at this point. All right, she's somewhere in that zone. Okay, she has maintained her beauty. Now, lifespans were a lot longer, but that doesn't mean that there hasn't been stress. We already have seen certain situations to where family members were getting killed and they had to flee, right? So this stuff, like there's stress happening, there's different life things that are happening, but she has maintained her beauty to the point where he knows we're going to get there and they are going to want you and they're going to want you bad enough that they're going to kill me. So tell them you're my sister. Well, if you only read this section and this part, you might say, why would he say that? Why would she claim to be a sister? That's a really awkward thing. Nobody would want to be married to their sister. Well, yeah, let's take a look at Genesis chapter 20, verses 11 to 13. And this was the other incident where this same line got them in trouble. Abraham said, I did it because their king was saying, why'd you do this? I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she indeed is my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do to me, or you must do me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother. Okay, so they had already made this agreement that this is the way it's going to happen. And apparently she, was his half-sister. She was his sister. That law obviously wasn't in place. Okay. And there wasn't exactly as much population. So different things were happening. Okay. So careful how you judge people. Anyway, I don't know. Let's just keep going. So, but yes, he is showing a real lack of faith in God and God's promise at the time. And that is one of the key things that people will always point out with this when you're going through commentaries. This shows a true lack of Abram's faith in God and God's promise, because he promised to give them a giant nation and to bless all the peoples and to do all this. That wouldn't happen if he was dead, because they didn't have kids yet. Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks. I just point out the obvious, Captain Obvious. What? Duh. Hello. I think that goes without saying. The fact that is the main point that commentaries are talking about. It's missing the subtleness of this and some of the other obvious pieces that I think really need to be stated, but never are. Their background is pagan. Pagan backgrounds are you do things for your gods in hopes that your gods don't eat you and kill you. It's all about do things to appease the gods, keep them happy, so that you don't die. Okay, so that they don't just maliciously kill you or just out of fun kill you. Okay, God is saying, I want to bless you. I want to do this. This is a change of mindset completely from everything they've known, from their surroundings. Their surroundings were pagans, straight up hardcore pagans. This is going to take a little bit of time. It's like today. If somebody comes to Jesus and that is not the background that they have, there's a little bit of change that happens, and that we call that sanctification. It's becoming more like Jesus, right? It's that process of going forward. It's not instantaneous for most people. Most of the time, it's a process, and things take time, and it's a gradual change. The Holy Spirit, God changes you bit by bit as he sees fit. And sometimes that's through going through trials, going through tribulations, making stupid mistakes, because we all do it, right? We all make mistakes. That's okay. And going through it, trusting that God's going to make things work out, okay? Doing our best to follow God and doing our best to do what it is that God's asking us to do, doing our best to follow, and trusting that God's filling in the gaps and doing everything else, because he knows that we can't do it on his own, okay? So the point here to keep in mind is twofold. Yes, this shows a lack of faith that God is going to fulfill and do what it is that he's going to do. But we also need to have a flip side to that coin and recognize this is a very different thing for them. They have no other examples of this other than Noah. They have no other examples to follow. They're setting the stage. They don't know what to do. So yeah, God's going to be a little gracious on that, okay? So it's okay. But let's continue on. 14 to 16. So, 14. When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. Let's pause here. So many people, again, in different commentaries, this just shows that women were treated like objects. Okay, yes, in ancient societies, there was a difference in men and women. Throughout basically all of human history, there has been a very distinct difference between men and women. Okay, very distinct difference. It hasn't been, except for the last, 3 years in Western society, that some of this has really changed. Like, that there's no longer a difference. You can't say there's a difference. Okay, so all of human history, there has been a drastic difference between man and woman. The man is the head of the household. Okay, that's this. Especially you get into the Near East, into these civilizations and these societies, this is normal. Okay, this is normal. This is not them trying to say this woman had no value. It's actually trying to say the opposite. The point of this right here is trying to say that she was such an amazing woman, at least by appearance, but then also by her attitude, because if she had a bad attitude, nobody would want to be around her anyway, right? It's the same thing, right? She was an amazing woman, and they were in awe of how fantastic she was. Okay, that's what's actually being said here. This is not a look at how horrible it was that women were seen as so. No, that's not what's trying to be said. What's trying to be said was she was at such a high caliber in so many different ways that everyone wanted to be with her. Okay, this is supposed to be flattering, not horrific. Okay, so when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. Why? Now that might be an interesting concept. Why is that the case? Why didn't the princes want her? Remember, she's probably in her 50s or 60s. She's not young. I mean, people were living over 100 years. So, I mean, but still, she's not like super, super young. So these princes are probably younger and saying, no, I need a younger woman, because it was the custom of the day that men would actually still marry younger than them, not usually older than them. And so they would praise her to their father, to the Pharaoh, saying, hey, she's more your age. And wow. So they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. Now, one of the interesting things here is the word, because we've kind of discussed a lot of this, and this seems like a very nitpicky point, but the word had in verse 16. And for her sake, he dealt well with Abram, and he had. He here is Abram. Okay, the reference here is to Abram. He had sheep. It isn't saying Pharaoh had sheep and all this other. Well, duh. He's the ruler of the land. Of course, he's got lots of stuff and lots of animals. Okay, that was a sign of power. This is saying Sarai was such a, not to sound sexist, but she was such a prize that the dowry that he's willing to pay and did pay, not only did he not kill Abram, which, by the way, I want your sister. Oh, look, there's no other family members. You could totally do that. Okay. I mean, that's not an honorable thing to do, not a good thing to do, but it could have been done. Okay. And then he could have kept all of these things. No, the Pharaoh wanted to bless that family for the wonder that was Sarai, and he did so with a lot of stuff. The had here is actually a very vague term, though. He had. It should be written, but because it is so vague, you get a slightly different take on multiple different commentaries, because that word, it's kind of a placeholder word, and it means almost 1,000 different things. What's really being said here was he was given. Abram was given, and for her sake, he, Pharaoh, dealt well with Abram. And he, Abram, had or was given sheep, oxen, male donkeys. These are plural, by the way. Male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, plural, and camels. He was given enough to where he could run and be the leader of an entire city himself for Sarai. This was a big thing. This was meant to bless her family. That's her brother, because normal with that dowry, you would give the father, and if the father's not there, you would then give the next man in charge in the family, which at this point was Abram. So this made sense. This was normal for that. But the Lord, meaning Yahweh, afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Now, while there's no direct place here saying that they had intimacy, that they laid together in a biblical sense, they had, there's no indication of that here directly. Some commentaries say these plagues were likely due to that action anyway, and maybe they were, STDs or something. But again, if that was the case, why isn't Abram having these issues? Why? I mean, it's just one of those. Some of that stuff doesn't even make sense. Like they're writing things in there that you couldn't possibly write into this, and so ignore that. The whole point here is, again, God's afflicting. There's a problem, and he's setting the stage, and he says, whoa, no, I'm going to bless those who bless you and those who dishonor you, even though Pharaoh honored him. He honored him by giving him all this stuff. He paid this immaculate dowry and as a blessing for Sarai. Okay, he was kind of duped into this. But because there's now dishonoring Sarai and dishonoring Abram by taking his wife, even though he didn't know, God puts these afflictions on them. 18. So Pharaoh called Abram and said, which means at this point, chances are Sarai is actually kind of opened up and said, well, what is all of this happening? Why is all of this happening ever since you've been here? Well, that man that was actually, that's my brother, well, he's actually also my husband. And then you get to 18. Why did you not tell me, or why did you tell me that she was your sister? Well, let me start that again. Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Like, take her back. I don't want this. It's kind of like, Jonah. Why is this storm happening? Well, it's because of me. Well, your God can deal with you. Take him back, right? Take her back. And says, take her back, take her and go. Verse 20, and Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Pharaoh didn't take all of his stuff back, according to this. Pharaoh let him take all that stuff. Just leave. Take your wife. Take this. Leave. I don't want these curses on my household, on my country. We don't need this. Take her and go. So because of God's call and blessing on Abram and Sarai, God deals a blow to Pharaoh and to Egypt and Pharaoh's house. And it's likely knowledge of Pharaoh that caused Abram and Sarai to lie in the first place, because he's probably known, this was a thing. You even see this later on in the Old Testament, later on in the scriptures. You get somebody who, oh man, that woman is beautiful. Oh, but she's married. Well, that's an easy fix for someone in my position, right? So things have known of this, and that potentially people in that area, kings and rulers of that area, were known and notorious to do this, was probably part of the reason why they were lying and doing this. Was it a sign of a lack of faith? Sure. But they needed to, in their mind, it's probably better to be defiled than it is to be dead. And so they're trying to survive and live and to do these things. And again, maybe not the best way to do it. In fact, since Jesus, we know we shouldn't be doing things definitely like that. But, that's kind of the mindset they're coming from. And again, they had a pagan background. This was You just did what you could to survive. Everything was all about survival. Now, I do want to point out before we wrap this up, because we're right at the wrap-up point, these situations really very well parallel the situation that comes later also in Egypt. So Israel going to Egypt, bad, and there's some parallels to this. So write these down, go over them later. We're not going to read them today, but go ahead and go over them later. There's the famine in the land that sends people to Egypt. You can look at Genesis 47:13. See that. They sojourn in Egypt, 47:27. There's a desire to kill the males, but not the females. You see that in Exodus chapter 1, verse 22. There's a plague and all the plagues on Egypt. Exodus chapter 7, verse 14, all the way to chapter 11, verse 10. There's taking the spoils from Egypt, right? So they take the things that Egypt gave them, or they take other things, and they took and left Egypt. You see that in Exodus chapter 12, verses 35 and 36. Deliverance, Exodus chapter 15. Going to Negeb, or Negev, whichever spelling is in your Bible, okay? That's that dry desert region south of Israel. Again, you see that in Numbers 13, verse 17, and verse 22, excuse me. So Numbers 13, 17, and 22. These directly parallel the situation that later happens and that the people deal with, and Moses, who's taken the people out of Israel, is recounting. And so these parallels really make a lot of sense. All right, what can we take away from this? So even seeing Abram respond to God's call, he wasn't perfect at having faith and doing things completely by the power of God. Okay, he wasn't perfect at it. Even though he's the father of the faith, he wasn't perfect at it. God still loved him, and he still loved Sarai. And he kept his promise to create the nation of Israel and to bless all the peoples through them. God's plan was bigger than their shortcomings, okay? That's something we all need to keep in mind all the time. God's plan, God's desires are bigger than our own personal shortcomings. The example in Egypt is not great. It's not a great example of what to do. In reality, it's an example of what not to do. Abram's faith seemed to waver and to keep going back to his old pagan roots from time to time. And there were obvious times of forward movement and forward momentum, but it wasn't instantaneous. Hopefully that sounds familiar to you, maybe with your life. Finally, allow God to work in your life in his way and in his timing. Longing to want to be better is a good sign that you're aligning with the Lord. Do not get discouraged and overwhelmed by defeatism. Trust God's plan trust in God's plan for and in your life. Thank you, God, for today, for your word. I ask that you be with us this week, that you bless us. And Father, just give us the courage to go out and do what it is that you have for us. God, help us know that even when we have our shortcomings, that you're big enough to work through that. But just because we know you're big enough to work through it doesn't mean that we just go ahead and fall in and embrace our shortcomings, that we still try to get better and we still try to do better and be a better follower of yours. Thank you, God, so much for this. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thank you, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. We will talk to you next time. There's a good chance we will not have it next week. I know. I'm sorry, I don't want to do that, but at the same time, there is a good chance that we will not have this next week, but I'll keep you guys in the loop with that. Have a great one. We'll talk to you later.